The guard noticed the tremor first, subtle, contained, passing through Princess Anne's left hand as she stared at the floor near the West Corridor bench. There was a child's shoe placed neatly beside the wall, laces tucked in as if prepared. It did not belong there. No child was scheduled in this wing. The guard paused. Protocol required movement. Instinct required stillness. The shoe was too clean to be forgotten. It sat against the stone wall beneath the West Corridor window, placed parallel to the skirting as if aligned by hand. Small, polished leather, buckle fastened, no scuffing on the sole, no sign it had been worn here. The corridor was otherwise empty, its long strip of carpet unbroken, the air cool and faintly metallic from the nearby security door. The guard slowed without meaning to. His boots stopped one pace short of regulation. That alone was a deviation. He corrected his posture immediately, shoulders square, chin level, but his eyes stayed on the shoe. Children were not routed through the West Corridor on weekdays. They never were. Schedules were fixed weeks in advance. Any exception required clearance. Any clearance left a record. There was no record. He felt the temperature first, not a change but an awareness of it. The corridor was colder than the adjoining gallery. Sound behaved differently here, softer, absorbed. His breathing felt louder than it should have. Princess Anne stood several feet ahead of him, facing the same direction. She had not moved closer to the shoe. She had not stepped away from it either. Her hands were clasped at her waist. The tremor in her left hand was slight, controlled, but continuous. It did not stop when she noticed him halt. She did not look back. Protocol dictated immediate reporting of unattended personal items. The words formed automatically in his mind, the phrasing precise. He had recited it in training. He had enforced it before. He did not reach for the radio. Instead, he adjusted his stance half a degree, blocking the open side of the corridor without appearing to do so. Anyone approaching from the gallery would see uniform first. They would slow. They would register presence. Seconds passed. The shoe remained where it was. Princess Anne spoke without turning. "That does not belong," she said. Her voice was steady, not quiet, measured. "No, ma'am," he replied. She nodded once, acknowledgement, not instruction. He took a single step forward, then stopped again. The instinct to look for the child came before the checklist. He scanned the corridor edges, the alcove near the window, the service door recessed into the paneling, the bench positioned beneath the security camera. The camera's red indicator light was on. Recording. Normal. He noted the bench because it was empty. Children waited there sometimes. Rarely but not never, always supervised, always restless. There were usually signs, movement, sound, imbalance. There was nothing now, just the shoe. He bent slightly, not enough to break posture, enough to see beneath the bench. Dust, no movement, no second shoe. His radio crackled once, not his channel, nearby traffic. He did not answer. Princess Anne shifted her weight. The tremor in her hand stopped, then resumed, slower. She inhaled through her nose and held it for a fraction longer than normal. He recognized the effort in that breath. Containment. "Has this been logged?" she asked. "No, ma'am." Then someone chose not to log it. "Yes, ma'am." That was the first irregularity spoken aloud. Not an accusation, a fact. He reached the edge of the reporting window, the point at which delay became violation. He could feel it like a line drawn on the floor. Once crossed, there was no undoing it. Reporting would bring movement. Movement would bring people. People would erase small details. He glanced again at the corridor mouth. Footsteps echoed faintly from the gallery, approaching, not fast. He made a decision. He keyed his radio partway, then released it without speaking. One more scan, one more check. The service door handle was angled slightly inward, not fully flush. That was new. He stepped toward it as the footsteps grew closer, knowing that if the door opened from the other side, he would be standing exactly where protocol said he should not be. He placed his hand near the handle and felt resistance on the other side. The resistance did not move. It was not the firm counterpressure of a locked mechanism. It was softer, uneven, as if someone, had been placed against the door without weight enough to brace it fully. The guard did not pull. He flattened his palm against the wood instead, spreading pressure to avoid sudden movement. The door gave a fraction of an inch and stopped again. A faint sound followed, fabric brushing fabric, then a breath drawn too sharply to be adult. He withdrew his hand immediately. Footsteps reached the mouth of the corridor. 2 sets, measured, palace staff by cadence alone. He stepped laterally, placing his bow. Die between the door and the approaching figures, posture unchanged, expression neutral. The shoe remained visible beyond him. He was aware of it the way one is aware of a fire alarm, present, unresolved. A senior aide appeared first, tablet in hand, eyes already flicking toward the shoe before the rest of her registered the scene. The second figure was a security liaison, junior, alert but deferential. "What's the hold?" the aide asked, tone clipped, volume controlled. The guard did not answer immediately. He waited the required half-second for Princess Anne to speak first. She did not. "There's an unaccounted item," he said. "I'm securing the area." The aide followed his gaze to the shoe. Her expression tightened, then smoothed. "Children aren't scheduled here." "No," he said. "So this is misplaced property." "It hasn't been logged." The aide exhaled through her nose, a practiced gesture. "Then log it and clear the corridor. We're already behind." Princess Anne turned at last. Her face was composed, but her eyes were fixed not on the shoe, not on the aide, but on the guard's left shoulder, on the service door behind him. "That door," she said, "why is it closed?" "It's normally latched open during transit," the aide replied quickly. "It isn't now," Princess Anne said. Silence followed, not long enough. The guard felt the moment narrow. He could hear the child's breathing now, faint through the door, irregular in a way that suggested effort to stay quiet. A hand shifted against wood. The resistance returned, slight. He made another decision. "Ma'am," he said to Princess Anne, "I'm requesting to open the service door." The aide's head snapped toward him. "On what basis?" "Safety," he replied. "That's not sufficient without." "I'm authorizing it," Princess Anne said. The aide hesitated. Authority recalculated in real time. She stepped back half a pace. The guard opened the door slowly. The child was pressed into the corner between stacked linen carts, knees drawn up, one socked foot bare. The other shoe was missing. The child's hands were clenched in the fabric of their sleeves, knuckles pale, no visible injuries, eyes wide, fixed on the guard's chest, not his face. He crouched just enough to lower his silhouette. "It's all right," he said, voice even, not soft, controlled. "You're not in trouble." The child did not speak. A nod followed, barely perceptible. The aide leaned forward. "Who brought you here?" The guard raised a hand, not a gesture of command but of pause. The aide stopped. He looked back at Princess Anne. She was very still now. The tremor had stopped completely. "We'll need to relocate," the aide said, quietly. "Yes," the guard replied, "with supervision." "That's implied." "It is now," he said. He stood and shifted position, placing himself between the child and the corridor. The act was subtle but final, a boundary set without announcement. Princess Anne watched him for a long moment, then inclined her head once. "Proceed," she said. The guard keyed his radio at last. "Control," he said. "I need a discreet escort to the West Service Junction. Child involved." There was a pause on the line before the acknowledgement came. In that pause, the guard understood something had already gone wrong long before the shoe was placed neatly against the wall. And that it would not end here. The first signal failed without sound. The guard noticed it not because something appeared on his display, but because something did not. The corridor camera feed should have registered the service door opening, timestamp, angle shift, metadata ping. His peripheral vision caught the absence before his conscious mind labeled it, a blank where a confirmation should have been. He did not slow his walk. The child stayed close, not touching him but moving when he moved, stopping when he stopped. The escort formation was deliberately narrow, guard in front, child slightly behind and to his left, junior security trailing at a distance that suggested observation rather than protection. The aide had fallen back entirely, her presence replaced by radio traffic and silence. The silence was wrong. Palace systems did not go quiet around incidents. They became noisy, overlapping confirmations, soft chimes, check-ins layered over one another until resolution. This was different. Channels were open but restrained. Responses clipped. No questions. Escort acknowledged, control had said, nothing more. They turned into the West Service Junction. Fluorescent lighting replaced chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and warm wiring. The child's breathing steadied slightly here, the rhythm less forced. The guard noted it without looking back. Halfway down the passage, his earpiece vibrated again. Hold position, control said. That too was irregular. He stopped immediately, raising one hand, not sharply, just enough. The child halted. The trailing security officer hesitated a fraction too long before stopping, eyes flicky. NG down the corridor. Reason, the guard asked. Verifying access records. The guard's gaze moved to the ceiling-mounted camera. Red light on. Recording. Still no confirmation on his display. Which records? He asked. A pause, longer this time. Manual overrides, control replied. That confirmed it. Manual overrides were rare, logged twice, cross-checked automatically. No one used them casually. The fact that control was verifying them now meant either a breach or an attempt to frame procedure around an action already taken. The child shifted weight. A sleeve brushed the guard's glove. He adjusted his stance, widening slightly, shielding without contact. Footsteps approached from behind. The aide reappeared, tablet gone, hands empty. Her expression was neutral in the way professionals practiced when neutrality was required rather than felt. We don't need to hold here, she said. The secure room is prepared. Control instructed hold, the guard replied. They're being cautious. So am I. She glanced at the child, not unkindly, assessing. This doesn't need escalation. The guard did not respond. He listened instead to the hum of the lights, the faint relay click inside the wall panel, the child's breath. No alarms, no raised voices, pressure without noise. Who authorized the override? He asked. The aide's jaw tightened. That information isn't relevant to your role. It is when it affects child movement, he said. That's not your determination to make. He turned his head just enough to look at her fully. I've already made it. Another radio vibration interrupted them. Proceed, control said. Room confirmed. The aide exhaled, relief flickering across her face before being suppressed. There, she said. Let's move. The guard did not step forward. Control, he said. Confirm camera sync in West Junction. Silence followed, not static, not disconnection, a deliberate gap. The aide's eyes sharpened. You're delaying. Yes, he replied calmly. For what purpose? Because something, being corrected after the fact. The child's hand lifted then dropped, fingers brushing the guard's sleeve again. A small, unconscious movement seeking proximity. He felt the weight of it more than if the child had spoken. Control, he said again. I need confirmation now. The silence stretched. And in that silence, the guard understood that whatever authority had moved the child unseen was now deciding how much truth could be allowed to surface. The confirmation did not come. Instead, the corridor lights dimmed by a fraction, barely perceptible, the kind of automatic adjustment meant to compensate for load fluctuation. The guard noticed anyway. He always did. Systems spoke even when people chose not to. "Proceed to the room," Control said at last. The voice was level, too level. The guard stepped forward, not because he was reassured, but because standing still any longer would shift attention to the child in ways he could not control. Movement, at least, allowed positioning. They resumed, slower now. The aide fell into step beside him, close enough that her voice could remain private. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said quietly. He did not look at her. Harder for whom? For everyone. That's vague. She stopped walking. He took 2 more steps before stopping himself, then turned back just enough to keep the child behind him. "Listen," the aide said, lowering her voice further. There was no intent to harm. Procedures were adjusted to avoid panic, that's all. "Procedures don't hide children," he replied. Her eyes flicked once to the ceiling camera. They reroute them. Then they leave records. They do, eventually. That was the clearest admission she had offered. Not guilt, not innocence, delay. They reached the secure room. Reinforced door, biometric panel, neutral interior. Designed for holding, not comfort. The kind of place where time flattened. The guard keyed access himself before the aide could. The door opened. He ushered the child inside first, maintaining his position between the child and the aide at all times. The junior security officer remained outside, uncertain, awaiting instruction that did not come. Inside, the room was cool, too cool. The child shivered once. The guard removed his outer glove and draped it over the back of a chair, pushing it gently toward the child without comment. The child hesitated, then took it, clutching it to their chest. The leather was oversized, reassuring weight. "I'll remain posted," the guard said. The aide frowned. "That's unnecessary." "It's appropriate." She studied him, calculating again. "You're assuming misconduct." "I'm assuming risk." Princess Anne's voice came from the doorway. She had arrived without announcement, without escort. That alone shifted the balance. "He will remain," she said. The aide inclined her head. Compliance without concession. "Very well," the aide said, "but this will be reviewed." Princess Anne met the guard's eyes. "So will everything else." The aide left. The junior officer followed. The door closed with a soft seal. The guard stood just inside, not at attention, not at ease. Present. The child sat on the chair, glove clenched, eyes lowered. After a moment the child spoke, not words, just a sound. A breath released unevenly. The guard said nothing. His radio vibrated again. This time the message was internal, restricted channel. "Remain available," Control said. "Inquiry pending." Pending meant decisions were being made elsewhere, without him, possibly about him. He acknowledged. Princess Anne remained in the doorway a moment longer. "You did well," she said, not warmly, not coldly, precisely. "Thank you, ma'am." She left without another word. The guard adjusted his stance, angling himself so the child was never fully in view of the door. Outside, footsteps passed. Voices murmured. The palace continued its functions. But the systems were still correcting themselves. And somewhere in the logs, slowly, reluctantly, truth was being reconstructed. The guard remained still, aware that his quiet defiance had now been noticed, and that the next pressure would not be subtle. The child did not cry. That concerned the guard more than if they had. They sat on the chair with their feet barely touching the floor, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the seam where the wall met the floor. The borrowed glove lay across their lap now, fingers folded inward like a second, heavier skin. The room's ventilation hummed softly, constant, indifferent. The guard remained standing, not looming, not distant, positioned so the child could see him without having to look up too far. He adjusted the angle of his boots a few degrees outward, an unconscious signal of stability, learned over years of crowd control and quiet reassurance. Minutes passed. He did not check the time. Pressure arrived instead. The radio vibrated again, same restricted channel. Escort status, Control asked. Contained, he replied. Child secure, awaiting further instruction. A pause, then stand by. Stand by was not neutral. It meant the situation had entered administrative space. Decisions filtered through layers now, legal, reputational, procedural. The child was no longer just a safety concern. They were a variable. The door opened without warning. A man entered, mid-level authority by insignia, not senior enough to command the room, not junior enough to defer instinctively. His expression was composed, his eyes sharp. He assessed the space in seconds: guard, child, distance, posture. Good, the man said softly. You're still here. Yes, sir. The man crouched slightly, angling his body toward the child but stopping short of engagement. I'm here to help sort this out. The child's fingers tightened around the glove. The guard noted it immediately. Name, the man asked, voice gentle. The child did not respond. That's all right, the man continued. We can take our time. The guard shifted his weight, subtle, but enough to break the man's line of approach. Sir, the guard said, the child hasn't been cleared for questioning. The man straightened slowly. I'm not questioning, I'm identifying. That still requires clearance. The man studied him. You're being very precise. Yes, sir. That precision may complicate things. Then things are already complicated. The man exhaled, not irritation, consideration. Do you know how the child got here? No, sir. Do you suspect misconduct? I suspect an irregular route. The man nodded once. That's careful wording. I try to be. He glanced at the child again. There's concern about how this looks. The guard did not answer. There was no malicious intent, the man said, just discretion. The word landed heavily. Discretion was how rules were bent without admitting they had been touched. The child shifted, shoeless foot curling slightly inward, a protective posture. The guard adjusted again, placing himself half a step closer without making contact. Sir, he said, the child was hidden. The man's eyes flicked to him, temporarily. Without supervision. With authorization. Which hasn't been produced. The silence that followed was tighter than before, less room in it. The man reached into his jacket, withdrawing a slim folder, not opened, not offered. Until this is resolved, he said, the child will be transferred to family care. That decision hasn't been communicated to me, the guard replied. It is now. The man stepped toward the child. The guard moved at the same time, not fast, not aggressive, just enough to block the path completely. This transfer requires verification, the guard said, and accompaniment. The man stopped, looked at him fully for the first time. You're testing boundaries, he said. Yes, sir. For a child who may not even be scheduled to exist here. The guard held his ground. That, he said calmly, is exactly why. The man's jaw set. Outside the room, footsteps roached again, multiple this time. And the guard understood that the next few seconds would decide whether procedure protected the child or buried them quietly under discretion. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Not clustered, spaced, deliberate. The man did not turn to look. He did not need to. He straightened his jacket instead, a small gesture meant to signal control. We're running out of time, he said, lowering his voice. This building does not pause for uncertainty. The guard remained in place. He felt the tension shift from procedural to personal, not emotional but positional. Authority was consolidating. The door opened again. Two additional figures entered, both senior enough to change the temperature of the room without speaking. One wore administrative insignia. The other was security, older, eyes already narrowed as if measuring consequences rather than people. "This is becoming inefficient," the administrator said. "Why hasn't the child been moved?" The man gestured lightly toward the guard. "Caution." The administrator looked at the guard. "Your role here is concluded." "No, sir," the guard replied. "It is." The older security officer watched him closely. "Explain." "The child was brought into a restricted corridor without logging," the guard said. "Moved through a service route under manual override, concealed. That constitutes a safety breach." The administrator's expression hardened. "It constitutes a temporary adjustment. It constitutes risk." The child shifted again. The sound of the chair leg scraping the floor was faint but sharp in the small room. All eyes flicked downward for a fraction of a second. The guard used it. "The child hasn't been medically assessed," he continued. "Hasn't been logged into custody. Hasn't been cleared for transfer." "That can be corrected afterward," the administrator said. "Not without creating gaps," the guard replied. "Gaps become questions." The administrator exhaled slowly. "You're overreaching." The older security officer raised a hand slightly, not to stop the conversation but to slow it. "Why was the child hidden?" The man answered quickly. "To avoid panic. A family matter escalated unexpectedly." The guard watched the officer's eyes. They did not soften, they sharpened. "Hidden where?" the officer asked. "Service corridor," the man said, briefly. "With no escort?" the officer pressed. "With," the man stopped, chose his words, "with indirect oversight." The officer turned to the guard. "Did you see any escort prior to discovery?" "No, sir." "Any logged presence?" "No, sir." The room settled into a silence that was no longer ambiguous. It was evaluative. The administrator shifted tactics. "We are not accusing you," he said to the guard, "but your insistence is creating visibility. Visibility has consequences." "Yes, sir," the guard said. "So does concealment." The child's breathing had quickened again. Not panic, anticipation. The guard adjusted his stance once more, placing his body fully between the child and the cluster of authority. The older security officer noticed. He did not comment. "Transfer will not proceed yet," the officer said at last. "We need confirmation." The administrator's head snapped toward him. "That delays everything." "It stabilizes it," the officer replied, "and prevents mistakes." The man looked between them, frustration leaking through control. "This is unnecessary." The officer ignored him. "The child stays, the guard stays." The administrator's lips thinned. "And if this attracts attention?" "It already has," the officer said. "Better the right kind." The decision settled like weight, not relief. Pressure redistributed. The administrator turned to the guard. "You understand this will be reviewed?" "Yes, sir." "Your judgment will be examined?" "Yes, sir." "And if it's found wanting?" "I understand." The administrator left without another word. The man followed, expression unreadable. The older security officer remained a moment longer. He looked at the guard, then at the child. "You did what you thought was right," he said. "Not approval, recognition." He left. The door sealed again. The guard exhaled for the first time since the room had filled. The child finally looked up. Not at the door. At him. No words, just a look that asked a question without knowing how to form it. The guard did not answer aloud. He remained where he was, steady, present, knowing that the palace had begun to shift its weight. And that somewhere above them, authority was now deciding whether to protect the child or protect itself. The secure room did not change, but the atmosphere did. The child sat with the glove folded in their lap now, no longer clutching it. That alone told the guard something had settled, at least temporarily. Not safety, never that, but a fragile pause. The kind that existed only until someone decided to move again. Movement came from the radio. Guard, control said. No channel designation. That meant escalation. Stand by for directive. The guard acknowledged without speaking. He shifted his weight slightly, careful not to draw the child's attention. His eyes remained forward, but his awareness widened to the door seam, the ventilation rhythm, the faint vibrations of activity beyond the wall. Directive meant ownership. Someone was about to claim authority over the situation. The door opened. This time it was not a cluster. One figure entered alone. She was senior enough that no insignia was needed. Her presence carried a practiced stillness, the kind learned through decades of navigating power without displaying it. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes moved quickly. Guard, child, distance, posture, glove. She closed the door behind her. "I'm here to resolve this," she said. The guard inclined his head. "Ma'am." She looked at the child. "You're safe," she said gently, not reassurance, assertion. The child did not respond. She turned back to the guard. "This situation has expanded beyond its original scope." "Yes, ma'am." "That expansion is partly due to your decisions." "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment. "Do you believe you acted correctly?" The question was framed carefully, not why, whether. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once. "I expected that answer." She stepped closer to the child, then stopped, just outside the guard's adjusted perimeter. She noticed it, did not comment. "There has been misuse of discretion," she said. "Not malicious, but significant." The guard did not react. He had learned long ago that acknowledgement came later, if at all. "To contain fallout," she continued, "we need to return this child to family supervision quietly." The word quietly again. "Ma'am," the guard said, "quiet transfer without documentation creates exposure." She smiled faintly, not warmth, precision. Exposure already exists, we're choosing its shape. She reached into her folder and removed a single sheet, held it but did not offer it. "This authorizes transfer under my name," she said. "It satisfies requirement." The guard looked at the paper, then at the child. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "the child has not identified who brought them here." "That will be addressed later." Later removes context. It removes pressure. The child shifted at the sound of their voices rising, not in volume but density. The guard adjusted again, subtle, practiced. "There is also the matter of the manual override," he said, "and the missing log entries." Her expression did not change. "Those are being reconciled." "By whom?" "By people whose role includes that authority." The guard felt the line approaching again, the one where silence became complicity. "Ma'am," he said, "with respect, I cannot release custody until verification is complete." Her gaze sharpened. "You're refusing a directive." "I'm delaying compliance," he replied, "for safety." "For optics," she countered. "For the child," he said. Silence followed, not tense, calculated. Outside the room, footsteps passed, then stopped. She glanced briefly toward the door. A signal had been sent. "You're placing yourself in a difficult position," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "And if I insist?" The guard did not answer immediately. He looked at the child, still silent, still watching him now instead of the door. Then back at her. "Then I will require a second authority present," he said, "and a recorded handover." Her eyes narrowed a fraction. That was defiance, quiet, documented. She closed the folder. "Very well," she said. "We'll do this properly." The door opened again, and the guard understood that by forcing procedure into the open, he had just invited a different kind of pressure inside. One that would not be patient. The second authority did not arrive quickly. That too was deliberate. The senior official remained inside the room, standing near the door, close enough to control entry without appearing to guard it. The guard stayed where he was. Neither spoke. The child's presence occupied the space between them like an unacknowledged third voice. Minutes stretched, not long enough to be obvious, long enough to be felt. The radio vibrated once against the guard's shoulder. No audio followed. A silent check-in. He did not respond. The official noticed. "You're inviting scrutiny," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "From people less restrained than I am." "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head slightly. "Why?" The question was quieter now, less political, closer to personal curiosity. The guard answered without hesitation, "Because restraint has already failed once." She studied him, then the child. The child's foot tapped the floor once, then stopped, self-corrected, as if remembering to remain unnoticed. The guard felt a tightening in his chest he did not acknowledge. The door opened. This time the sound was different, heavier, purposeful. A uniformed officer entered, Oversight Division, identifiable by insignia alone, older than most, the kind of officer who had seen consequences play out over our years rather than moments. Behind him came the aide from earlier, face composed but eyes tight. The officer surveyed the room once, then addressed the senior official. "You requested secondary authority." "Yes," she said, "we have a custody dispute." The officer's gaze shifted to the guard. "On what grounds?" "Unverified transfer following an unauthorized route," the guard replied, "with missing logs." The aide interjected quickly. "Those logs are being reconstructed." The officer raised a hand. Silence followed immediately. "Reconstructed is not the same as recorded," he said. The aide stiffened. The officer stepped closer to the child, stopping at the same invisible boundary the others had encountered. He did not attempt to cross it. "Did anyone explain why you were brought here?" he asked gently. The child hesitated, then shook their head. A small motion, enough. The officer exhaled slowly. "That's sufficient." The senior official's expression hardened. "We don't need to." "We do," the officer said, "because now it's not about discretion, it's about consent." He turned to the guard. "You will maintain custody." "Yes, sir." "You will document everything you observed, not interpretations, only facts." "Yes, sir." The aide opened her mouth, then closed it. The senior official straightened. "This will have consequences." The officer met her gaze evenly. "So will the alternative." The decision landed, not loudly, final nonetheless. The aide left first. The senior official followed, her composure intact but strained now, like a surface under too much weight. The officer lingered a moment. "You'll be asked why you delayed reporting," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." "You'll be asked why you challenged authority." "Yes, sir." He paused. "Answer carefully." "Yes, sir." The officer left. The door sealed. The room returned to stillness, but it was not the same stillness as before. It was heavier, charged, the kind that followed a choice that could not be reversed. The guard remained standing. The child looked up again. This time they spoke. "Am I in trouble?" The guard answered immediately. No delay, no hedging. "No," he said, "you're safe." The child nodded once, accepting the answer without question. Outside the room, the palace adjusted, quietly, reluctantly, to the presence of truth it could no longer fully contain. and the guard understood that the pressure would not ease from here. It would only rise. The order came without ceremony. "Prepare for movement," Control said. No justification, no timing window, just the directive. The guard did not acknowledge immediately. He looked at the child first. The child was sitting straighter now, the earlier collapse inward replaced by a careful alertness. They had learned quickly that stillness mattered. "We're going to walk," the guard said. His voice was even, informational. "You stay beside me. If anything feels wrong, you stop, I stop." The child nodded once. The door opened. The corridor beyond was longer than necessary. That was the first problem. Routes inside the palace were rarely direct by accident. This one had been selected. The lights were brighter than the service junction, the carpet newer. Cameras were visible, too visible. Their red indicators glowed steadily, all active. "Too clean." The guard stepped out first, positioning his body so the child remained shielded from lateral sightlines. Two security officers fell in behind them, spaced wider than escort protocol suggested. Observation, not support. They moved. Within 10 paces the guard felt it, the subtle tightening between steps. The corridor was active but quiet, doors closed, no staff crossing, no incidental noise. It felt staged, like a passage cleared too thoroughly. Halfway down, a voice carried from behind. "Hold." The guard stopped instantly. The child stopped with him, close enough now that their sleeve brushed his tunic. He did not move away. A figure approached from the far end of the corridor, not uniformed, civil authority, senior by posture alone, the kind that did not hurry because time bent around them. "This transfer is inefficient," the figure said as they drew closer. "We can resolve this without parade." The guard remained still. This route was authorized. "By whom?" "Control." The figure smiled faintly. "Control answers to people." "Yes," the guard said, "so do I." The figure's gaze slid to the child. "You're frightening them." The child did not react. That was new. The guard registered it immediately. "No," the guard said, "you're crowding." He adjusted his stance, a half step forward. The boundary reasserted itself. The figure stopped. "You're creating visibility again." "Yes." "That has implications." "Yes." The figure's smile disappeared. "Do you understand what happens when guards forget their place?" The guard answered without raising his voice. "They remember why it exists." A murmur passed through the officers behind him. Not agreement, uncertainty. The corridor lights flick. "Occurred once." Not a failure, a test. The child's hand tightened briefly, then relaxed. They stayed in place. The figure glanced upward at the lights, then back at the guard. "This doesn't need to escalate." "It already has," the guard replied. Silence stretched. Cameras continued recording. Every second added weight. The figure stepped aside at last. "Proceed." The guard did not move immediately. He waited one beat longer than required, then resumed. As they passed, he felt the pressure shift again, not away but upward. Someone else was watching now. And the corridor ahead narrowed, not in width, but in margin for error. They did not make it 10 more steps before the next adjustment. The guard felt it through his earpiece before the voice arrived, the faint vibration that preceded an override signal. A channel priority shift. Control, but not the same control as before. "Change route," the voice said. "Immediate." The guard stopped again. The child stopped with him. This time there was no delay at all. "Negative," the guard replied. The corridor behind them went still. The officers froze, waiting for instruction they did not have clearance to question. "Confirm compliance," the voice said. The guard turned his head just enough to look toward the nearest camera. He did not speak into it. He spoke past it. "State reason for route change." Silence followed, not empty, calculating. "Congestion ahead," the voice said at last. "There is none," the guard replied. "Visual confirmation." The child shifted slightly, foot adjusting on the carpet. The guard felt it through proximity alone. "Proceed as directed," the voice insisted. This was the test. Not of obedience, but of justification. The guard keyed a different channel. Oversight, restricted. He had not been invited to use it, that was the point. "Oversight," he said. "We have conflicting movement directives involving a minor. Request clarification." The response was not immediate, but it came. "Hold position," Oversight said, a different tone, less polished, more weight. The original channel went silent. The guard exhaled slowly, barely perceptible. He did not look back. He did not look down. He remained exactly where he was, body angled protectively, blocking forward and rear approach at once. Footsteps approached again, this time from both ends. Two senior officers entered the corridor from opposite directions, both uniformed, both carrying authority that did not need explanation. "This is turning into a spectacle," one said. "It became one when the first log went missing," the guard replied. The officer's gaze sharpened. "You're documenting this?" "Yes, sir." "Good," the other officer said quietly. "So are we." They approached the child, stopping short, mirroring the guard's invisible boundary. The child looked up at the guard once, then back down. "Do you know who brought you here?" one officer asked gently. The child hesitated, then shook their head. "Did anyone tell you where you were going?" Another shake. The officers exchanged a glance, brief, decisive. "We're assuming custody," one said. The guard did not move. "Under whose authority?" "Joint," the officer replied. "Recorded." That was new and correct. The guard stepped aside, only enough to allow the officers to reposition, never breaking proximity with the child. The formation shifted smoothly. Protective shape maintained. The corridor lights stabilized. Camera indicators pulsed once, confirming synchronized recording. The test was over. For now. As they moved again, the guard felt it, the pressure easing just enough to signal a change in phase. Not resolution, exposure. Behind them, the original authority watched from a distance, unreadable. Ahead, the palace opened into a wider passage, less controlled, more visible. The guard knew what that meant. From here on, nothing could be hidden quietly. And that was exactly what some people feared most. The wider passage changed everything. Sound traveled differently here. Footsteps echoed instead of dissolving into carpet. The ceiling rose, chandeliers returning, light warmer but less forgiving. This was a space designed to be seen in, not hidden within. Staff moved at the edges now, pausing, pretending not to look, noticing anyway. The guard adjusted his pace, not slower, measured. The child stayed close, matching each step without instruction. That, more than anything, confirmed the stakes. The child had learned the rules of movement too quickly. Oversight remained on the channel, silent but present. The two senior officers flanked the formation loosely, not taking over, not retreating. Shared custody in practice, if not yet on paper. They reached the junction where the corridor split into three. The guard knew the routes by memory. One led to public-facing rooms, one to administrative offices. One, narrower, less obvious, led to a temporary holding suite used when timing mattered. He angled toward the third without announcing it. No one challenged him. That was another signal. Inside the holding suite, the air was warmer, the lighting softer, neutral by design. The guard positioned the child near the interior wall, then stepped aside just enough to allow the senior officers to enter without breaking the protective arc. A door closed behind them, not sealed, just closed. The first officer spoke quietly. "We need facts, only what you observed." "Yes, sir." The guard did not sit. He remained standing, posture unchanged. "Start with the shoe," the officer said. The guard did. Placement, condition, location, time. He spoke without inference. No motive, no accusation, just sequence. The second officer nodded. "And the door?" "Partially latched," the guard replied. "Resistance from inside, no mechanical obstruction. Sound. Breathing inconsistent with adult capacity." The officers exchanged a look. "Cameras?" the first asked. "No entry confirmation," the guard said. "Indicator active, feed present, metadata absent." That earned a pause. "That shouldn't be possible," the second officer said. "It shouldn't," the guard agreed. The child shifted on their feet. The guard noted it immediately. "Do you need a break?" the first officer asked the child gently. The child shook their head, then after a moment nodded once. The guard moved a chair closer without comment. While the child sat, the guard continued. "Manual override was implied," he said. "Control later confirmed verification in progress." "Implied by whom?" the officer asked. The guard hesitated for the first time. Not uncertainty, precision. "By omission," he said, "and delayed acknowledgement." The officer accepted that. "Who attempted transfer?" The guard named roles, not individuals. Senior aide, administrative authority, security intermediary. Each interaction logged by time and position. "You delayed reporting," the second officer said. "Not accusation, confirmation." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The guard answered without raising his voice. "Because immediate reporting would have displaced the child before assessment." Silence followed, not disapproval. The first officer closed his notebook. "That delay will be questioned." "Yes, sir." "It may not be supported." "Yes, sir." "But it preserved the scene," the officer said, "and the child." "Yes, sir." Outside the suite, footsteps passed, a cluster this time, voices muted, decisions traveling faster now. The second officer leaned slightly closer. "We're going to request system logs directly, unfiltered." The guard nodded. "That will upset people." "Yes, sir." The officer allowed himself a thin smile. "Good." The door handle turned slightly, then stopped. Someone was listening. And somewhere beyond the walls, the palace systems were being asked questions they were never meant to answer cleanly. The door did not open. Whoever had tested the handle withdrew without announcement. That mattered. It meant the room had been noticed, but not yet challenged. The first officer stood and moved toward the wall console. He did not activate it. He placed his palm flat against the casing instead, grounding himself, thinking. "We'll need independent access," he said, "not rooted through internal control." The second officer nodded, "Already requested." The guard remained still. He felt the shift again, not forward, not backward, sideways. Authority was no longer vertical. It was spreading, diluting the ability of any one figure to contain the narrative. The child spoke quietly, not a question this time. "He said it would be quicker." All movement stopped. The guard did not turn toward the child immediately. He waited, one breath to avoid startling them. "Who did?" the first officer asked gently. The child shrugged. "A man, he had a badge not like yours." The guard felt the words settle into place like a missing piece. Badge but not uniform. Access without visibility. "Did he touch you?" the officer asked. The child shook their head quickly. "No." "Did he tell you to be quiet?" A pause, then a nod. The guard's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. The second officer wrote nothing down. He waited. "Where did he take you?" "Through the small doors," the child said. "The ones with no pictures." "Service corridors." "Did anyone else see you?" "I don't think so." The room absorbed that. The first officer straightened. "That's enough for now." He turned to the guard. This confirms concealment. Yes, sir. An intent to bypass visibility, the second officer added. Yes, sir. The door opened then. No hesitation this time. A senior legal advisor stepped in, expression already calibrated. She took in the room, the child, the officers, the guard, then closed the door behind her. We're going to manage this carefully, she said. There are reputational considerations. The first officer did not sit. There are safeguarding obligations. Those will be met. They already were, the officer replied, glancing at the guard. Despite interference. The advisor's eyes flicked to the guard, measured, weighing. We'll need your written statement, she said, immediately. Yes, ma'am. And you understand, she continued, that your actions may be reviewed for proportionality. Yes, ma'am. Even if well-intentioned. Yes, ma'am. The advisor paused. Why did you block the transfer? The guard answered simply, because the child asked no one to be moved. The advisor blinked once, not expected. The second officer closed his notebook. System logs are coming in. The advisor stiffened. From where? From outside your loop, he said. Silence followed, real silence this time. The advisor exhaled slowly. Then we proceed formally. The first officer nodded. We already are. He turned to the guard. Remain with the child. Yes, sir. The advisor hesitated, then spoke more quietly. This will not stay contained. The guard met her gaze. It shouldn't. She left. The door closed again. The child looked up. Am I going home? The guard considered the question, the variables, the danger of false certainty. Soon, he said, and with people who know where you are. The child nodded, satisfied. Outside the suite, the palace shifted again, this time audibly. Phones rang, doors opened, voices layered. Evidence had been introduced. Not dramatically, but irreversibly. The corridor outside the holding suite filled without warning. Not crowded, controlled. People positioned themselves as if by habit, not instruction. 2 legal staff near the wall console, security at measured intervals, an aide who did not speak. No one approached the door. That restraint mattered. It meant protocol had taken over, not emotion, not reputation management, procedure. The guard felt the change in the air before he saw it on faces. Conversations were quieter now, slower, words chosen for record, not effect. Inside the suite, the child remained seated, legs still, hands folded. The guard stood close enough to be seen, far enough to allow space. He did not speak unless addressed. Presence was enough. The radio vibrated. Guard, oversight said, remain where you are. Yes, sir. Your statement has been requested. Yes, sir. Do not elaborate beyond observation. Yes, sir. That instruction protected him as much as it constrained him. Facts over framing, sequence over narrative. The door opened again. The oversight officer entered alone this time. No entourage. That too was intentional. He nodded once at the guard, then turned to the child. We're going to make sure everything that happened is written down correctly, he said. You won't need to explain anything more today. The child nodded. The officer turned back to the guard. Walk me through the delay. The guard did not hesitate. I paused reporting for 43 seconds. Why that length? Because that was how long it took to scan the corridor and identify the service door anomaly. The officer nodded. You knew that pause could be questioned. Yes, sir. And you accepted that risk. Yes, sir. The officer watched him closely. Did anyone instruct you to delay? No, sir. Did anyone instruct you not to? No, sir. The officer exhaled. Good. He stepped aside, making room as a recorder was placed quietly on the table. Red light on. Official now. State your name and position. The guard complied. Begin from the first irregularity. The guard began again. Shoe, placement, corridor schedule, Princess Anne's reaction, his own decision points. He did not justify, he did not defend, he described. As he spoke, the child remained silent, calm, listening. Halfway through, raised voices echoed faintly from outside the suite. Not shouting, firm disagreement. The officer did not look toward the door. When the guard finished, the officer nodded once. Thank you. He reached for the recorder, but did not turn it off yet. Do you believe protocol failed today? He asked. The guard considered the question carefully. No, sir, he said. I believe it held. The officer's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, recognition. Outside, footsteps approached again. Faster now, less composed. The door handle moved. This time it did not stop. And the guard understood that the final pressure would not come from systems or aids, but from someone whose authority did not expect to be resisted at all. He shifted his stance, placing himself just enough in front of the child to matter. The door opened. The man who entered did not look at the child. That was the first mistake. He was senior, political senior, not operational. His authority came from proximity to power rather than function, the kind of figure whose presence usually redirected rooms without effort. This has gone far enough, he said, calm, controlled, used to being obeyed. The oversight officer did not stand. He did not sit either. He remained exactly as he was. You're interrupting a recorded statement. That can be paused. No, the officer replied. The man's eyes flicked to the recorder, then to the guard. They lingered there longer. You, he said, step outside. The guard did not move. Sir, the oversight officer said, the guard remains until the statement concludes. The man smiled thinly. I'm not asking. The guard spoke for the first time without being prompted. Sir, I am under instruction. The man's jaw tightened. From whom? Oversight. That word shifted the balance. The man turned his attention fully to the officer. This is becoming unnecessarily public. The officer met his gaze. It's becoming accurate. A silence followed, dense, charged. The man exhaled slowly. You're aware of the implications. Yes. Reputations. Yes. Stability. Yes. Continuity. Yes. The officer's voice did not change. Safeguarding. The man's eyes hardened. You're elevating an administrative error. The guard felt the child tense behind him, a subtle intake of breath. No, the officer said, we're addressing concealment. The man glanced at the child for the first time. His expression shifted, not softened but recalculated. This child was never in danger, he said. The guard responded immediately. Then there would have been no need to hide them. The words landed harder than anything shouted could have. The man turned slowly. You're exceeding your remit. Yes, sir, the guard said. I did. The oversight officer watched closely, and that will be assessed. The man's voice dropped. You're setting a precedent. The officer nodded. That's the point. Silence again. Then the man straightened his jacket. This will escalate, he said. It already has, the officer replied. The man left without another word. The door closed. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the oversight officer reached forward and turned off the recorder. That will be all, he said quietly. He looked at the guard. You'll remain on duty. Yes, sir. You'll be reviewed. Yes, sir. But you will not be disciplined today. The guard acknowledged with a nod. The officer turned to the child. You're going home. The child's shoulders dropped a fraction. Relief contained. The officer stood. Protocol did not break today, he said. It was tested. He paused, and it held. He left. The guard remained. Outside, the palace continued, adjusted, altered, but intact. The child looked up once more. You stayed. The guard answered simply, that's my job. And for the first time since the shoe had been placed so carefully against the wall, the pressure eased, not gone, but redistributed. The story was no longer about concealment. It was about record. And records once made could not be unmade. The child left through a side exit reserved for staff transitions. No cameras pointed directly at it. No ceremonial doors. Just a narrow passage, a waiting vehicle, and two adults whose presence had been verified 3 times before arrival. The guard watched the handover from exactly 1 step back, close enough to intervene, far enough to signal completion. The child did not look behind them. That, more than anything, told the guard the transfer was correct. When the door closed and the vehicle moved away, the corridor returned to its original state. Not empty, reset. The palace had a way of absorbing disturbance without erasing it. Footsteps resumed their ordinary rhythm. Voices returned to conversational volume. Systems hummed as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted. The guard remained at post. No instruction had released him yet. Oversight liked pauses. They allowed consequences to surface naturally. The radio stayed silent. 10 minutes passed. Then footsteps, measured, solitary. Princess Anne approached without escort. She stopped where the corridor widened, far enough to respect the guard's position, close enough to be intentional. She looked down the passage the child had taken, empty now. "They're gone?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once. Her hands were still this time, no tremor. "They will ask questions," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "They will not all be fair." "No, ma'am." She regarded him for a moment longer. "You understand that some will say you complicated matters." "Yes, ma'am." "And others will say you prevented something worse." "Yes, ma'am." She allowed herself a brief pause. Both may be true. She turned to leave, then stopped. "You chose stillness when motion was expected." "Yes, ma'am." "That is not common." "No, ma'am." She met his eyes. It was necessary. She left without another word. The guard remained. Later, much later, the review notice arrived. Not dramatic, an entry on a schedule, a request for availability, the kind of follow-up that suggested scrutiny, not punishment. He acknowledged it and returned to his routine. That evening, the west corridor was cleared again for maintenance. The bench was removed. The service door left open under supervision. The shoe was logged, bagged, and archived as evidence. Small, silent, undeniable. The guard stood watch as usual. Nothing else happened. And that was the point. Because when protocol holds, it does not announce itself. It simply prevents the next wrong object from ever being placed where it does not belong. The review did not arrive with a summons. It came as an entry in the duty roster, time, location, 2 names already assigned. No subject line, no framing language. That omission was intentional. It meant the matter was no longer volatile. It had been absorbed into process. The guard reported as scheduled. The room was smaller than expected. Functional. No flags, no portraits, just a table, 3 chairs, a wall-mounted recorder already active. Oversight sat on one side, legal on the other. Neither smiled. "State your understanding of why you're here," Oversight said. "To account for my actions during a safeguarding incident," the guard replied. Legal glanced down. "And do you?" "Yes." They did not ask him to repeat the events. That work had already been done. Instead, they focused on margins. Why did you position yourself between the child and senior authority? Legal asked. Because proximity alters behavior, the guard said, and the child had already been concealed once. Why did you refuse the route change? Oversight asked. Because the justification provided did not match observable conditions. Why did you invoke oversight without instruction? The guard did not pause, because the situation exceeded routine command. Silence followed, not resistance, verification. Oversight leaned back slightly. Do you believe you would act differently if placed in the same position again? The guard considered the question carefully. No, he said. Legal looked up, even knowing the personal risk. Yes. Oversight nodded once, noted. The recorder clicked off. That concludes the review, Oversight said. You're cleared to return to duty. No warning, no commendation, no commentary. That too was deliberate. Back in uniform, back on rotation, the guard returned to the same corridors. Different shifts, different faces. The palace moved forward as it always did, by forgetting selectively. But systems remembered. Manual override privileges were adjusted. Corridor access protocols were rewritten in language so precise it bordered on unforgiving. Escort requirements for minors doubled, then tripled, then stabilized. No announcement accompanied the changes. They simply became harder to bypass. Weeks later, the guard passed the west corridor again. The bench was back, new, bolted, positioned beneath a camera whose angle had been adjusted by 4 degrees. The service door bore a fresh seal, its handle now logging pressure, not just movement. No shoe sat against the wall. Princess Anne passed through once more days later. She did not stop. She did not look down. She walked with the calm certainty of someone who knew the ground beneath her had been reinforced. The guard stood at attention as she passed. She inclined her head. That was all. The incident never appeared in public record. No headlines, no statements, no denials. The child's name never surfaced. That absence was protection, not erasure. For the guard, life returned to routine, long hours, quiet vigilance, endless repetition. But he noticed something new. Guards paused more often now. Not long, just enough. Enough to look twice at what did not belong. Enough to wait 1 second longer before moving on. Enough to let instinct surface before protocol buried it. And in that narrow space between pause and action, stillness had been restored, not because nothing was wrong, but because someone had chosen to notice when it was.